Hey guys, Bike Photography here, and today we're looking at a fashion shoot I did with model Faye Sato, and I'll link her Instagram in the description if you're interested in seeing more of her work. And in this video we were doing a fashion style urban shoot with particular attention to the big orange coat that Faye is wearing. So in this video we're going to go into all the different equipment that I used. We'll go into a specific photo and then talk about the camera settings that the camera was on when this photo was taken. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the photographic techniques, such as how it was composed, why it was composed and the way it was composed, the lighting techniques and that sort of thing, and then we're going to jump straight into Photoshop and we're going to do a step-by-step edit of the photo as well. So the camera equipment I used for this photo shoot was a Sony A7rii. I was using a Sigma MC11 adapter so that I could use Canon lenses on my Sony camera. And finally I was using my new Sigma 35mm 1.4 art lens. Now for some of the photos on this photo shoot I also used off-camera flash with my Godox AD600BM studio strobe, but for this photo, which we're going to be looking at in particular, it was all natural light. And if you're interested in picking up any of this equipment, please consider buying it through my affiliate link in the description. It'll really help me out a lot. So this is the photo that we're going to be looking at today. I'm choosing this one because I really like the pose that Faye is in. It's a very difficult pose to pull off, but one that's used quite a lot in high fashion photo shoots. It really shows off the orangey red coat, which is sort of the focus of this photo, and I really like the background as well. All these lines from the steps look good and the background isn't too busy. So the settings I used in camera for this photo was an aperture of f1.4, a shutter speed of 1/250th of a second, and an ISO of 200. And once again, it was the Sigma 35mm f1.4 lens that we were using in this photo shoot. So the reason I shot at an aperture of f1.4 is I really wanted to blow out the background and leave Faye at the front of the image in focus. I was using the 35mm 1.4 from Sigma, and because you've got such a wide aperture, it means that your depth of field, even when you're shooting really wide open, you don't get quite as much compression as if you were shooting with something like an 85mm, which really blows out the background in quite a dramatic way compared to the 35mm, so that's why I shot as low as possible. I was shooting at a shutter speed of 1/250th of a second because we were in full shade, so it was actually quite dark where we were shooting. And a shutter speed of 1/250th of a second is fast enough so that you can capture any motion in the image. Nothing too quick. If Faye was flailing around, it would start getting a little bit blurry. But for this sort of shooting we were doing, 1/250th of a second is far quick enough to capture sharp images. And the reason that we shot at an ISO of 200 is because if we'd shot any higher than that, we would have started introducing noise into the image, and 200 was as low as we could go to have a acceptable exposure in the photo while also keeping a high fidelity signal, letting us have lots of flexibility in post-production. So let's talk a little bit about lighting in this image. For this photo in particular we were using natural light, and we made sure that we were in an area that was shaded just so we got a nice even light throughout the scene. Now luckily enough we were in the city, so all the buildings were really nice and high, and it stopped the harsh shadows, the harsh sun coming into this image and making hot spots and making shadows and that sort of thing. So as you can see on the ground, Faye isn't making any shadows, there aren't really any strong highlights anywhere in the image as well, and that makes for a really smooth, even lighting across the entire scene. So let's jump into Photoshop now and look at the editing process we used in this image. So I'm going to leave the raw file to this image and a couple of others in the description, just if you want to edit along or if you want to have a go at these photos, or for whatever reason, you can find them in the Dropbox link below. And also let me know in the comments if you'd be interested in me doing a live stream / live chat with you guys. I'd be really interested in knowing your thoughts on that, and maybe doing one possibly later in the month. So leave in the comments if you'd be interested in me doing a live editing session, and possibly we'll do one at the end of the month. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add some clarity to the image, not a whole bunch, just a little bit to add some mid-tone contrast into the hair and just into little spots here and there on the image, so probably around 12 or 15, maybe about 13 points. Then we're going to mess around with the shadows, and I reckon a little bit of a drop looks good, and then also maybe drop the whites a little bit just because there's a little bit of whiteness going on just up there. And I reckon that looks pretty good. So the next step I'm going to do is I'm just going to make her eyes pop out a little bit more than they currently do. So I'm just going to go to the brush tool and then add a little bit of exposure, not too much, just a very small amount, and just rub it into her eye whites there and there. So next step is I'm going to just reset my brush tool and drop the shadows and the exposure slightly, and just add a little bit of shadow to the eyebrows. Not a lot again, just going to add a little bit just to make them pop a little bit, and then I'll do it to her eyes here too, and a little bit to the eye line just there as well. Yep, and that looks pretty good. Okay, now I'm just going to reset my brush again, and I'm going to smooth out her skin in one rough pass, and then we're going to do another skin smooth in Photoshop as well. Right, so I'm just going to drop the exposure, shadows and blacks all the way just so I can see exactly where I'm clicking, and I'm going to remove that afterwards, but just for now I'm going to leave that in just so I can see where exactly I am brushing in. Now there is a masking tool in Camera Raw, which is a plugin for Photoshop. It should come by default, but I've just been doing it this way for so long, and also it's pretty much the same thing programmatically, that I'm just going to do it this way instead, but if you want to use the masking tool, that's fine as well. So once we've got her skin, making sure not to go over any lines that we want to stay sharp, we're just going to get rid of the blacks, shadows and exposure drop that we put in, and then reduce the clarity. And as you can see, changing the clarity makes her skin more smooth or more rugged. So I like to go about 30 points, just drop that down. And you can see that her skin still isn't quite smooth. Her skin is very good, considering it hasn't had any work done to it yet. But yeah, it just makes a little bit of a difference. And also you can do the hands as well, but they're looking pretty small and you can't really tell. So I'm just going to add a little bit to the legs as well. And because this is a fashion shoot, you can go a little bit more crazy than you normally would. But I like to keep it like relatively realistic, so I'm not going to go absolutely crazy. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just resetting my brush tool, and I'm going to add a little bit more exposure to her legs here, just because they're looking quite a lot darker than the rest of the scene. Okay, that looks good. Next step I'm going to do is I'm just going to get my brush and reset it again, and just remove all the things it has on it, add a little bit of saturation, and just go over the coat a little bit. Because the coat is the most important part of this image, because the photo shoot is sort of an advertisement for this coat, we're just going to add a little bit of saturation, doesn't have to be too careful, to the coat just to make it pop a little bit more. So that's everything I think we're going to do in Camera Raw. Let's jump into native Photoshop and move on to the next step. So one thing that has really been bugging me about this image so far, and you may have already noticed it as well, is just this little piece of fluff. So I'm just going to get rid of that. Much better. That really gets my OCD going right there. So first thing we're going to do, aside from that little change, is we're just going to clean up the skin a little bit. So this patch tool here is a great tool for cleaning up skin. You just drag it around what you want to remove and then pull where you would like to clone the skin that looks smooth, and that gets rid of blemishes that way. So we're just going to quickly clean up some of the skin. I'm not going to go crazy with this just because I don't want to make the video 30 minutes long, but we'll just do some of the ones you can see from far away. Not much to do here. Face skin was actually really, really good, and her makeup was really good as well. I'll just get rid of that hair as well. I'm being quite rough with this edit just because we want to keep this video quite small, but you get the idea. That looks pretty good. Alright, so another thing that's bugging me about this image as well is it's not composed perfectly. And what I mean by that is Faye, in my opinion, should be sort of about here, but she's a little bit too far over to the left. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change the composition of this image like this, and I think she's in the right position there now. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to distort basically the image as it stands now, just to move it over a little bit. So we go right click, free transform, right click, distort, and then what we can do here is we can sort of drag over the distortion. But as you see, as far as you go, the further you go, sorry, you can see like a line here where it's obviously been distorted. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring it over so it's almost there, and then we're just going to drag up and down until it looks about straight, and I think that is about right there. Then what we're going to do is fix up this top bit here. So we're just going to, not quite that much there, and we'll do the same thing here. And that looks totally fine. And then we might even be able to get away with just doing a delete content aware. So what I'm doing here is I'm just pressing delete, and because this layer is locked, we can have a content aware fill, and the computer will just fill in that gap there in what it thinks should be there. So next step here, what I'm actually going to do, because this is a fashion shoot, you can modify the model slightly to fit the shoot. So what you'll see often is airbrushing, you'll see models becoming skinnier and things like that, and we're just going to make her legs a little bit longer, and in the same process get rid of this little block here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to see if I can get rid of this block of white by changing this down a little bit, just enough so you can't tell. That looks good. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get her entire, probably from about here, and then we'll do edit, free transform, distort, and then just move them down a little bit like that, maybe even a little bit more. Perfect. So you can tell quite a big difference, but not too much that it starts to look strange. Now with this little gap here, we probably can just do another content aware deletion. And no, that's not quite right, so what we might do again is another quick distort. So free transform, distort, and just pull it down a little bit more to about there. And then I think with this we can get rid of that little white spot there with a content deletion. And then obviously you can clean these little things up over and over again until it's perfect, but in the interest of time we'll just do a rough and dirty edit. So for now I think that looks pretty good. Obviously we can make that a little bit better, we can make this here a little bit better, but for now I think that will do. And obviously the same for this little bit there. Actually that looks pretty good. Yeah, we could change that a little bit more, but in the interest of time that looks fine. So a few last things to do in this image. Just going to do a little bit more skin retouching. Just with the baggy eyes here, we're just going to do a content deletion on that one. Actually I'll drag that down because that didn't look so good with the content deletion. And then we'll do the same thing here. So the great thing about the patch tool, is that it often will keep a median texture between the two as well, so the image looks more smooth that way. And the final thing we're going to do is we're just going to delete a couple of these little blobs here because I think they're a little bit distracting. Alright, and that's the final image. So I really hope you liked this video. Please leave in the comments if you would be interested in me doing a stream later on in the week or later on in the month. Please leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content, and once again thank you very much for watching.